So today, the research I'm going to talk about, the title is Deriving Autism Spectrum Disorder Functional Networks from Resting State Functional MRI Data using Group ICA and Dictionary Learning. That's the outline for today. So autism is a brain disorder. Usually the patients, they will have the social and communication difficulties. According to the Centers for Disease Control, in United States, nowadays, around 60 children, there's one kid has autism. And you can see here, boys are nearly 5 times more likely to have autism than girls. And according to the WHO, every 270 people, there's one has autism. So these people are affected by autism. These autism difficulties, it's lifetime. So it will affecting their family and the communities. So this is a very urgent public health need to do some research on autism. And usually the early intervention will lead to positive outcomes later in their life. So the scientists, they're trying to find out the cause behind this autism, and so we could find a better treatment plan for these patients. Although this autism has been identified since the early 1960s, however, its exact etiology is still unknown. So the scientists suggest it's a combination of different factors. It could be environmental factors, it could be family-related factors. So it's a combination, and it's very complicated. Usually, traditionally, the symptom-based diagnosis of autism need a highly experienced experts team to do some behavior assessment. However, usually this kind of diagnosis will result poor treatment because the lack of knowledge of neuropathology. So in the past 2 decades, an increasing number of neuroscientists, they started to try to use machine learning algorithms to study these autism patients using some neuroimaging data. So we hope the scientists hope we can use these machine learning algorithms to figure out the etiology behind it, so we could provide more effective treatment outcomes, so we can study the pathology behind it. And usually they will use the neuroimaging data. There are 2 very popular techniques. One is anatomical technique. Another one is called functional technique. So for the anatomical one is trying to track the normal and abnormal of the tissues of the brain, because the diseased tissues tend to have higher water molecules than the normal tissue. So the MRI image will show the difference. And for this MRI, usually it's a 3-dimensional data cube. So it has been connected by one slices, usually like 60, maybe 60 slices for the one data cube. It's 3-dimensional. Another technique is functional technique. For the function technique is to try to track the brain activity. So because these autism or Alzheimer's disease, they have some functional alteration, right? So usually we will use the functional MRI data to study, because the functional MRI data will track the brain activity. And for the functional MRI data, it is a sequence of 3-dimensional cube. So for the MRI data, it's a 3-dimensional data cube. For the functional MRI data, it has one extra dimension, that's the time series. So you see, for each pixel, for each pixel's location, we will connect a time series along the time. So it's a 4-dimensional data. So MRI is 3-dimensional. The functional MRI is 4-dimensional because we will connect the data along the time. And the general purpose for functional MRI data study is to analyze the brain voxel's time series to detect the bold signal. So these are called the bold signal. The data we catched in functional MRI data is called the bold signal. We couldn't directly to get the neural activity data. However, we could infer the brain activity by using this bold signal. And generally, there are 2 different types of functional MRI data sets. One is called task-specific functional MRI data set. Then a second one is called resting state. So the main difference is while the people are connecting the data, if it's task specific, that means the patient or the people, they're doing some tasks. For example, they will ask you to squeeze your hand or give you visualize some movies or pictures. So the patients are doing some tasks. And if it's resting state, that means you just lay down on the machine and then doing nothing. Maybe you just stare at a fixed point, then doing nothing. So it's in the resting state. Initially, the people, they want to learn specific regions of the brain. For example, they want to study which brain is related to motor task, or which brain is related to visual function. So they will design some events or task while you're collecting the data from the patient, they are doing some tasks. So that's the initial research focus on task-based specific functional MRI. However, nowadays, the resting state functional MRI is a very popular one. It's becoming the most popular method to study the brain functions, because a lot of research has demonstrated that even in the absence of external task, the brain regions, they have spontaneous fluctuations in the bold signals. So if the patient has mental disorders, we could detect the difference between the healthy people and the mental disorders. And we're hoping using these difference to detect the biomarkers for this disease. So the objective for this study, we want to derive the functional networks for the autism group, and then we want to use the machine learning algorithm to classify the autism group and healthy group using the network we derive from group ICA and the dictionary learning. So the data set we used in this study is downloaded from the public data repository. It's called ABIDE. The full name is Autism Brain Imaging Data Exchange. They have the data. Their data has been aggregated from different labs. For example, Stanford, MIT, these different university, they delivered all the data together, so they aggregate all the data together. And in this paper, we downloaded 120 subjects of resting state functional MRI data. For these 120 subjects, there are 58 autism, 62 healthy people, and among all these subjects, 13 are females and 107 are males. And these are the summary information. The age ranges from 8 to 35. So first, after we download the dataset, we have to pre-process the dataset. The dataset download from the ABID already pre-processed, so we can start to extract the features from it. To extract the features, we have to use the brain atlas to extract the region of interest. So here, usually we have 3 different kinds of brain atlas. The first one is the structure atlas, and the second one is function atlas. The structure atlas is based on the anatomical properties, and the functional atlas is more preferred to the brain function property. So a lot of papers, demonstrate that their functional atlas is working better than the structure atlas usually. And the third category of method is data-driven methods. So the structure atlas and the function atlas, they are predefined brain maps. So it's predefined. You just extract this region of interest. And some people, they prefer to use data-driven methods. So they propose data-driven methods. We're not going to use the predefined models. We just want to extract the networks from the data itself. And the popular one is group ICA and the dictionary learning. So that's the 2 methods we're going to use for this paper. So let's start with the ICA. So ICA, the full name is Independent Component Analysis. This is from a very popular problem, a cocktail party problem. So there are some people, they're talking together, it's a party, and then we put several microphones in different colors, and each microphone will record what they're talking about, right? And then for microphone 1, we could get 1 signal, and for micro 2, we could get the second one, and then we could get the third signal from the microphone. And then we only know XI, X1, X2, X3. So that's the known. That's the only unknown part is X. What they're talking, we don't know. However, we want to recover what speaker 1 is talking about, what speaker 2 is talking about. So that's the S, that's the source we want to recover it. And you can see here, that's kind of the weights, right? You see in microphone 1, the speaker 1 is closer to microphone 1, so the weight is bigger, and that's the speaker 3, it's far away from the microphone 1, so the weight is less. And for microphone 3, it's vice, it's opposite, right? So we could use these ICA to recover speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3, what they're talking about. However, there's a condition. The condition is the number of microphones has to be larger or equal than the number of speakers. If you have more speakers, then you cannot do this. So that's the original problem to solve these cocktail party problem. We also can apply these ICA to the functional MR data sets. So we have a lot of functional MR data set, X. So we only know X. We don't know A and S. A and S are unknown. That's the one we want to calculate. And these X are the measurement functional MR data set. And then we want to extract independent, spatially independent networks. So these networks, the number of networks is definitely smaller than the number of voxels. So usually we have more than 10,000 voxels in a functional MR data set. So the condition is satisfied, and we could use these ICA to get the components we want. So X is the known. And here is the single IC on single subject. So that's for 1 person, 1 subject. We could have the X, and then we can use IC to extract the spatially independent components. That's the networks. And however, in our situation, we want to study 2 groups, right? We want to classify 2 groups. So we will think about in terms of group level. The easiest way to analyze group level is just concatenate. That's the first subject, second subject, and then you continue, you just concatenate all the subjects together, and then you can get a group level. However, these methods couldn't directly detect the difference for these within the subjects. So in order to get the better results, or we can detect individual difference between the subjects, Cox, they proposed an updated group model. It's called canonic ICA. This one shows first they use the PCA to do remove the noise, and then they use CCA. CCA is the canonic correlation analysis, and then they can get the group patterns, and then at the end use the ICA to get a group independent components. So that's the two models. That's the group ICA one. We use this one for this. And the second one is the dictionary learning. So recently, a lot of scientists, they are trying to use the sparse representation, sparse coding to analyze the functional MR data, because they said the brain activity is showing the sparse response, right? So we could use the dictionary learning to analyze the data because they have the sparse representation. That is the coincides with these dictionary learning. And here we will use our known data set to learn a dictionary. So that's the dictionary. The dictionary has a lot of add-ins, so we will learn the dictionary, and then finally we could get the group maps. And usually these dictionary will represent the function activity for these voxels. And here A will indicate the spatial location of the voxel. So that's the two models we're going to use in this paper. And next one is feature extraction. So we will use the functional connectivity. This functional connectivity is the manifestation of the activation level for the brain regions. In this study, we will use the function connectivity of the region of interest to classify ASD and healthy people. So first, we will use, that's the function matrix for example, if here we extract 20 regions from the brain, and then we could have a 20 by 20 connectivity matrix, and this matrix is symmetric, so we're only going to use half of the matrix as the input feature. So that's the whole pipeline we're doing. First, we will use group ICA to generate networks, and we will use the dictionary learning to generate networks, and then we will use these group ICA's network to extract the time series from the original data set, and then we will calculate the feature functional connectivity, and then use the half triangle as the input for the classifier. Here, the classifier we use is the kernel support vector machine. We use the Gaussian kernel. And this is the maps we generate using the group IC. That's the 20 components we picked. So I read some papers, they usually suggest when you use these group IC, so usually 20 components is a good number. So we picked 20 components, the 20 components from the IC, group IC. That's the region of interest we generate. That's the network we generate. Then we use this to create a brain mask. And then that's the network we derive from dictionary learning. And then we generate a brain mask. And then we use these masks to extract these regions from each subjects, and then we calculate the function connectivity. Here, we use the Pearson correlation. Pearson correlation is a very popular function connectivity measurement in function MRI study. There are other measurements. Here, we use the Pearson correlation. And that's the result. So this first, we just use the group ICA networks to extract the time series, and then we do the classification, and this result is 5-fold cross-validation. That's the sensitivity, that's the specificity, and the accuracy. So we report 3 different metrics, and the second one is the results from only use the dictionary learning networks. So that's the results from the dictionary learning networks. And then at the end, we combined 2 networks together, and then we also do the same procedure just to combine them together. So we have 40 components, and you can see the results is improved in all 3 fields. Yeah. And the source code and the results for this paper is delivered. It's available in my GitHub. So if you're interested, you can try to run and try. And this is the ROC curve for group IC's results. The error is, I'm sorry, it's not that clear, but it's 0.66. Okay, and this one is from the dictionary learning is 0.771, and that's the result from both group IC and the dictionary learning. It's 5-fold, so we did 5-fold cross-validation. And for the future work is we need to download more data sets, and we can try different classifier, maybe try some deep learning neural networks, yeah, that's all.